If you watch Huntley Prime at all, you have, I think, met my guest before. Andy Bannister has been here once before. He is the Canadian director of Ravi Zacharias International Ministries. Ravi Zacharias is known around the world as a great Christian apologist, defender of the faith, a man with a great intellectual capacity and yet a great heart for the broken. And Andy is in Canada as his director. And I want to pick up, Andy, where we, well, not where we left off the last time, but you alluded to something and I wanted to kind of build on. There's a kind of a prevailing climate or orthodoxy these days, especially among university educated people, that exclusivity in faith is a bad thing. Inclusivity is a good thing. One should never take a stand, for one's personal faith if in fact it should offend or alienate the person of the other faith. To the point that many evangelical Christians find themselves comfortably absent whenever there is a discussion of who knows the truth. What's your perspective on this?
I think you raise a good point there. I mean, Jim, here we are in Canada, one of the most pluralistic societies countries on earth, and so inclusivity or tolerance is often the key word. I often hear people say, well, as Christians, we need to tolerate our Muslim neighbour, our Buddhist friend, and not engage in argument, not engage in disagreement. Least of all, suggest that we're right and they're wrong. And I think the problem with that, for me, is that tolerance is actually does nothing more than erect barriers between us and our friends. You see, tolerance says, look, I don't want to know about your Islam. I don't want to know about your Buddhism, your Sikhism, your Judaism. You have your religion, I have mine. In fact, I don't want to hear you. Because if we start hearing each other and talking, that's when the danger is likely to emerge. Because what I found over the years, the more that you talk to people of other faiths, I've been working and engaging in evangelism among Muslims now for about 13, 14 years, the more you have those conversations, the more you realise that all religions are not the same and are profoundly different. And so the way to avoid that tension for many people is you raise the tolerance barrier. But tolerance, I think, cuts us off from our neighbour. The gospel encourages us to love our neighbour. So I would encourage Christians to have conversations with those of other faiths and listen. Don't tell them what they believe. Don't tell your Muslim friend what he or she believes. Listen. Let them be your teacher for what they learn, for what they believe rather, and then share with them what you believe and explore the differences. And over 13 or 14 years of talking to, dialoguing with, arguing with Muslims, interestingly, I've never once had a Muslim friend say to me, how dare you tell me that I'm wrong? In fact, they've often been the first to tell me that they think I am wrong. And we've had wonderful discussions. It's only Christians, I think, here in the West who tend to get a bit nervous and start saying, oh, you mustn't have these conversations. I do not hear that from Muslims.
Well, Jesus said, nobody comes except the Father draws him, which raises two interesting points. One is that it seems from Jesus' perspective, salvation is supernaturally generated. It's not the result of argument. It's the result of some supernatural agency of God whereby he moves into a life and convinces one of what sin is and of what righteousness is, what judgment is, the Scripture says. But the other is that with this supernatural engagement, if you're a Muslim or whatever friend from some other faith background does come to faith in Jesus, it's not going to be because you have convinced them or you have argued them into faith.
No, absolutely. I think evangelism and apologetics, the kind of ministry that we're engaged in, I think it's both the work of the human and the work of the Spirit goes side by side. So I think the work of the apologist, the work of the evangelist, the work of each one of us as we talk to our friends and neighbours is perhaps to help them see how Christ has worked in us, to see that their objections are not reasonable. So, for example, I often have Muslims who will come to me and say, Andy, how can I possibly trust the Bible? The Bible has been corrupted. You must follow the Quran. And it doesn't take more than an hour or so's conversation over a coffee, and you can help them see that that objection is unreasonable. And once you've cleared that blockage away, then I think that enables them to encounter Jesus. My goal with my Muslim friends, for example, is always to get them to a point where they will go away and read the Gospels on their own merit. That's what I'm constantly saying to Muslims. Don't judge Scripture for yourselves. Go and read the Gospels and encounter and see about the Christ you encounter there. Don't bring your presuppositions that perhaps you've heard through your apologetics class at the mosque, because Muslims do apologetics as well. But come to the Gospels with an open mind and see who you encounter there. And the job of the apologist, therefore, is to just remove that barrier so that they can encounter Christ.
What is the Quran's view of Jesus?
The Quran's view of Jesus is an interesting one. He's the prophet in the Quran who is mentioned the most. There are about 90 verses that talk about him. The Quran is very, very clear. He's not the son of God. He's merely a prophet. He's a very high-ranking prophet, but he preached the same as everybody else, including Muhammad. So the Quran relativizes him. It drags him down to the same level as every other prophet. But on the other hand, it says some unusual things about him. The Quran calls Jesus a spirit from God, a word from God. He's born of a virgin. That story is there in the Quran. He's the only prophet in the Quran who is sinless. So on the one hand, the Quran drags him down. On the other, there is this peculiar, exalted view of Jesus. The most profound point of disagreement there would be chapter 4, verse 157 of the Quran, which seems to deny that Jesus was even crucified. So I find it interesting. As an apologist, I face two challenges. Muslims believe that Jesus wasn't killed, and atheists believe he wasn't resurrected.
Huh. But yet they believe that he was born of a virgin and he was sinless.
They do, and the sinless one is a very interesting one because this is a very sensitive area with Muslims, but it does seem to be the case if you read the Quran and you read the Muslim traditions that Muhammad was a man who was conscious of his sin. Muhammad was a man who was a sinner like everybody else. Muslim sources make that very, very clear, and that's a sensitive area and we need to be careful as we address it. But that's a huge difference from Jesus in the Quran and the Islamic tradition, who even the Muslim sources are keen to stress was a man who had no sin, the only human being to whom that applies. And I like to use that to open up questions with my Muslim friends. Why is it? What is it about Jesus that makes him stand out? And in fact, the fact that he stands out, doesn't that mean that you should take his claims and his teaching very seriously?
Your website?
RZIM.ca.
RZIM.ca. Ravi Zacharias, internationalministries.ca. Andy Bannister, thanks for coming our way.
Thanks very much.